has more troops on the border with Ukraine than at any time since 2014. 5 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed this week alone. These are all deeply concerning signs. We are, of course, President spoke with President Zelenskyy, as you know, last week. In addition to reassurances to Ukrainian officials, the United States, we are also discussing our concerns about the increase in tensions in ceasefire violations and regional tensions with NATO allies.
Peter Zalmayev, he's the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative and joins us from Kiev. Peter, really appreciate your time. Now, less than a year after a ceasefire between these two countries, we're seeing the situation just getting worse. Ukraine says almost 30 of its soldiers have been killed since the beginning of this year by Russian forces. What's happened over the last few months that has made the situation even worse?
Well, what's happened is that, first of all, the Ukrainian president has not proven as pliable as Vladimir Putin expected him to be. He shut down several pro-Russian TV channels here. He's generally not gone along with Russia's suggestions of following the Minsk, agreements, which, if followed to the letter, would not be in Ukraine's favor. The one thing that Ukraine is lacking is control over its eastern border. And so Ukraine is really not happy with the situation. Zelensky has been much harder to deal with than Putin expected. And of course, Putin's popularity rating has declined. Mr. Navalny came back, was arrested. He's calling for a new wave of protests. So the usual, sort of standby for the Russian president is to invoke this image of the enemy of Ukraine and the West that stands behind it ostensibly. And so this way to mobilize the population and to regain some of the popular support that he's lost.
Peter, do you expect a full-on conflict to erupt soon, or are these talks that are scheduled for the 19th of April looking to calm the situation?
Well, the hope is that yes, even though just the sheer amount of military power that's been pulled towards the Ukraine borders tells us that there may be some sort of hostility, and in the fog of war, we don't know where it will lead, how big it will be. But there are several concrete demands that Russia has. I think Russia wants to have the sanctions weakened. It also wants the Western resolve to sort of fracture. It wants to separate America from the Europeans. And also it wants a very concrete thing from Ukraine that I failed to mention earlier, and that is access to fresh water for the Crimea, the occupied Crimea. The tourist season is starting soon, and Crimea is very short on water. And Ukraine is the one factor that needs to happen for the access to start to flow. And so far, Ukraine has not been pliable. It's refusing to provide access to Crimea. And so it's a very serious, a very practical problem for Vladimir Putin.
And how do you expect these thoughts to go, considering Ukraine has the full support of the United States and several Western nations, and also Kiev now looking to join NATO as a full-time member?
Well, Ukraine's been looking to join NATO for a long time. I don't think it's going to be happening in the near future. But we do have a new guy in town in Washington, and Joe Biden, I think, will act if he has to much more forcefully and strongly than the guy he worked for, Mr. Obama. Joe Biden knows Ukraine better. He's much more, I think, his intention is much stronger to defend Ukraine, and I think that sends a strong signal to Russia. And my hope is that Russia will understand that the guy in Washington is different, and Ukraine is no longer the same Ukraine as we had in 2014. Ukraine's army is much stronger, so the cost to Russia's military involvement will be much higher. So to answer your question shortly, I think that there will be some kind of a formula found, and we will avoid a full-blown war between the two countries.
Hopefully that will be the situation. Peter Zalmayev, really appreciate your analysis live to us there from Ukraine's capital.